For centuries, Buddhist teachers and Zen masters have pointed to something most of us miss. Beneath our busy days, beneath our thoughts and worries and endless plans, there is a silence that has never left us. An ancient stillness that waits patiently beneath everything, no matter how far we have wandered. This stillness was here before we learned to worry, and will be here long after the worries of the day have passed. It is our most natural and familiar home, the one we forget and remember, and forget and remember again, across a whole lifetime. Tonight, we are coming home to that silence. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you are listening from. In the hours ahead, we will journey through old stories and quiet teachings, offered gently, one after the other. The silence we are returning to does not require your effort. It only asks that you stop for a little while and listen. So let your shoulders drop, let the jaw soften, let the breath find its own unhurried rhythm. And when you are ready, let us begin this gentle journey together. There is an old saying in the Zen tradition that the path home is not a long journey outward, but a quiet turning inward. The Buddha spoke of it in simple words, that freedom from suffering can begin with something as ordinary as a single mindful breath. And so it is with this hour we are spending together. We are not going anywhere new. We are only returning to what has always been here, beneath the noise of our days. Returning, gently, to the silence that waits inside us, patient as the evening. Think, for a moment, about how full a modern life can be. The endless list of things to do, the worry about tomorrow, the replaying of a conversation from earlier in the day, the quiet feeling, even as we lie down at night, that we have not quite caught up. We carry all of this wherever we go. And even when the body finally rests, the mind keeps walking. And yet this is not only the weight of our times. To be a human being on this earth has always been a demanding thing. In every age, in every corner of the world, people have had to rise before the sun, tend to their children, feed their families, grieve their losses, and carry on. Life has always been full. But in every age, alongside all that effort and all that striving, there have been quiet places. Small monasteries tucked into the trees, huts of bamboo set back from the village road, a cave on a mountainside where a single robe hung at the door, places where someone chose to step aside from the great river of doing and simply sit. The Buddha himself, long ago, left his own busy life to find such a place. He sat beneath a great tree, and what he discovered there was not a new religion, not a new philosophy, not a new set of rules. He discovered, very simply, that the mind has the power to return to itself, to come home. He called this power a kind of magic, not a magic of coins and colored scarves, a gentler magic, the magic that is hidden inside every ordinary moment, waiting to be noticed. In the old Buddhist teachings, it is said that there are two great magics available to every human heart, two kinds of quiet sorcery. The monks and nuns of old spoke of them in hushed tones, not because they were secret, but because they were sacred. The first magic is the magic of mindfulness. Mindfulness is the art of stepping back from the life we are living, just enough to see that we are living it. It is a small and luminous shift. One moment, you are inside your day, tangled in it, believing every thought, carried by every feeling. The next moment, without any effort at all, something quietly lifts, and you notice. You notice you are here. You notice there is breath moving in the body. You notice that the story you were lost inside is, after all, only a story. The Buddha once said, "Master your senses, what you taste and smell, what you see and hear. In all things, be the master of what you do and say. Be mindful. Be free." That is the whole teaching, offered in a single breath. Be mindful. Be free. The second magic is the magic of love. Not romantic love, not ordinary affection, but the deep, unhurried love that the old teachers called metta, a love closer to gravity than to sentiment, a love that quietly pulls us toward belonging, just as the earth holds the moon in its slow circle, and the sun holds the earth, and the ground holds every falling leaf and every falling apple beneath the tree. There is a gentler gravity inside each of us, pulling everything together, reminding us that we are not separate from this world, that we have never been separate. This is metta. This is the love that holds all things. Mindfulness allows us to see clearly. Metta allows us to feel gently. Together, they quietly undo the spell of a complicated life. Together, they return us to silence. Let us explore a story about a traveling monk from long ago who discovered this truth in an unusual way. In an earlier age, when the paths between villages were still dirt and the mountains were still wild, there lived a quiet monk who had spent many years in a forest monastery. He was a gentle soul, soft-spoken, with a mind well trained in meditation. But he also carried a small secret pleasure from his younger days. He was, among other things, an amateur magician. In the folds of his robes, he hid a few small coins. In the sleeve of his tunic, a length of colored thread. And when he traveled through the high mountain villages, where the people had rarely, if ever, seen a wandering monk, he would greet them with a little magic. He would walk into a village at the edge of evening, sit beneath a broad tree, and wait for the children to gather. And they always came, curious, barefoot, peeking from the doorways of their small homes. He would smile, and in a soft voice, he would say, "Come closer, little one. I have something to show you." A brave child would step near. The monk would reach out, very gently, and seem to pluck a small coin from behind the child's ear. The child would gasp. "How did you do that?" The child would whisper, and the monk would only smile and open his empty palm, and then, with a turn of his wrist, a second coin would appear where there had been nothing. The other children would run forward. The elders would stop their evening work and turn toward the tree. The monk would juggle 3 pebbles into the sky, making them vanish between his palms, and then reappear from behind his own ear, laughing softly as he did. "More," the children would say. "Do it again." And he would, because there is a sweetness in making children laugh, and the monk had not lost that sweetness, even after all his long years of practice. One evening, deep in a remote valley where the villagers had almost no contact with the outside world, the monk came walking down a steep path at the edge of day. The air smelled of cooking fires, of rice and wood smoke. The soft bells of distant goats drifted up from the fields below. Somewhere, a mother was singing to a child, an old song in an old language, the kind of song that seemed older than the mountains themselves. The monk sat beneath a tall tree near the center of the village and waited, as he always did. The children came first, then the women, wiping their hands on their skirts, then the old men, leaning on walking sticks, The monk performed his small magic as he always did. The coin behind the ear, the pebbles into the sky, the gentle laughter when the third pebble reappeared from behind his robe. But afterward, something different happened. The villagers did not ask him how he did it. They did not reach for his sleeves to find the hidden coins. Instead, one by one, they stood up and began to imitate him. They raised their hands as he had raised his hands. They tilted their heads as he had tilted his. They made the same gentle gesture he had made just before the coin appeared behind the child's ear. An old woman among them, her face soft with age, stepped close to the monk and spoke quietly. "Teacher," she said, "we do not know the words you whisper to the spirits. Will you teach us?" The monk was silent for a long moment. He realized, with a slow rising tenderness in his chest, that these people were not trying to uncover a trick. They had seen something happen that was beyond their understanding, and they were, in their own quiet way, asking for the mystery to visit them too. That evening, as the stars came out over the mountains, the monk sat beneath his tree and did not sleep. He thought of the coin behind the child's ear. He thought of the gestures the villagers had been making. And he thought of something his old teacher had once said to him, long before, in the stillness of the monastery. "There is only one magic that matters, my young friend," his teacher had said. "The rest is just sleight of hand." The monk had not understood those words at the time. He had been young and quietly proud of his cleverness. But sitting now beneath the stars, in the company of these humble villagers, he understood at last. The coin behind the ear, the juggled pebble, these were small entertainments. Pleasant, harmless. But the real magic, the magic that could change a human life, was not in the hands. It was in the heart. It was the magic of a mind that had returned to itself. The magic of awareness. The magic of love. Years later, when he was an old man, he no longer carried coins in his robes. He carried only silence. And when children gathered around him, as they still did, he did not pluck anything from behind their ears. He simply sat with them and breathed and smiled. And somehow, the children went home that evening feeling they had witnessed something wonderful. This is the magic we are practicing here, in our own way, in the quiet of this evening. It is so ordinary that we often overlook it. It does not ask us to travel. It does not ask us to learn a new language or to find a special teacher. It only asks us to notice, to return again and again to the breath moving in the body, to return to the small sounds of the room, the warmth of the blanket, the soft weight of our own hands resting in our lap. In the Zen tradition, there is an old saying, before awakening, chopping wood, carrying water. After awakening, chopping wood, carrying water. The work of the day does not change. The chores remain. The kettle still needs to be filled. The floor still needs to be swept. But the one who is doing the work has, somewhere along the way, quietly returned home. As the mind begins to settle, as the body begins to soften, time itself begins to loosen. The clock on the wall keeps ticking, but the listener inside us grows still. There is less rushing ahead into tomorrow, less pulling back into yesterday. There is only this moment, and this breath, and this gentle recognition that the silence we have been searching for was never anywhere else. It was only waiting for us to stop long enough to find it. The Buddha offered this teaching in his own simple words. "Are you quiet?" he asked. Quiet your body. Quiet your mind. Awaken yourself. See clearly the way things are. And live with joy and freedom here and now. Here and now. Not elsewhere. Not later. Here. And so the two great magics, mindfulness and love, are not powers we must somehow acquire. They are not skills we must polish over many years. They are already ours. They have always been ours. They are the deep inheritance of being human, the quiet birthright that no life, no matter how busy, can ever truly take from us. All that is asked of us is to notice. So if you would like, you might try something very small as we continue together. With the next breath, simply notice that you are breathing. You do not have to change the breath. You do not have to slow it down or deepen it. You only have to notice. And with that small act of noticing, a little magic has already happened. The one who notices is already standing in the doorway of freedom. Already, a little of the spell has lifted. Already, a little of the silence has come home. This is enough. This is always enough. Let us pause for a moment. Notice how you are feeling, and when you are ready, we will continue together. The Buddha taught that the path of awakening is not something separate from the ordinary moments of our lives. It is woven through them. Walking is practice. Eating is practice. Sweeping a floor is practice. Holding a sleepy child in the evening is practice. The quiet tending to whatever is in front of us with a soft and open heart slowly becomes the whole path. Most of us grow up believing that the deepest part of life can only be found if we step away from the world. That we must travel somewhere far, or find a special teacher, or sit in a perfect hall of perfect silence. And yes, when we can step aside, that is a gift. Retreat is a beautiful thing, and the Buddha himself sat beneath a tree, alone, for many days and many nights before he awakened. But the Zen and Buddhist masters who came after him were quick to remind us of something gentler. They said the very life we are already living is the field of awakening. The very things we did not plan for, the very turns in the road we would not have chosen, can become, if we meet them softly, the soil where true wisdom grows. Most of us, when something unexpected comes into our life, greet it as an interruption. A new responsibility arrives. A person we love needs more of our time. A quiet plan we had for ourselves gets set aside. And we think, deep inside, this is pulling me away from my real life. This is keeping me from what I was meant to be doing. The Buddha, with great kindness, offered a different idea. He said that the present moment, exactly as it is the doorway. Not the life we had imagined. Not the life we have been planning for. This one, with all its small surprises, is the life in which awakening becomes possible. There is a beautiful old Buddhist story that carries this teaching better than any explanation ever could. Let us sit with it together. Let us explore a story about two young teachers who lived long ago in a small nunnery, nestled in a quiet valley between green hills. They were known throughout their region as women of unusual wisdom. The elder of the two, a soft-spoken young woman with thoughtful eyes had become one of the most respected students of the Buddha's teachings in her entire country. She had studied the ancient scriptures for many years, memorizing long passages, sitting with old masters, rising before dawn to read by the gentle light of an oil lamp. Her dear companion, a young woman only a year or two younger, was also a scholar of great promise. Together they had planned to travel, that very season, to a remote mountain hermitage, to deepen their meditation in silence for a year or more. Their small cloth bags were packed. The path up the mountain was waiting. And then, one year, a great storm passed through the valley. The rains came heavy and the winds were strong. The people of the valley were strong too, and they began, in the days that followed, to rebuild together. But many families found themselves moving to new homes while their own were being repaired. Life was shifting gently in every direction. One evening, the elders of the surrounding villages came to the nunnery with a quiet request. They stood at the gate with folded hands. "Sisters," one old man said, "there are 18 young girls who need a steady, loving place to rest while their families are finding their way back. Would you open your doors to them? Just for a season. Just until life settles again." The two young women looked at each other. Their mountain retreat was waiting. The deep silence they had trained for so many years, was waiting. The younger sister spoke first. "Of course," she said, and her companion nodded, smiling. "Of course." The girls arrived the very next morning, walking down the path in a small, quiet line. The youngest was only 5 years old. The oldest was close to 13. Some were shy, hiding behind the skirts of the others. Some were bold, already asking where they would sleep and whether there would be rice for supper. Some walked quietly with wide and watchful eyes. The two teachers smiled at every one of them and knelt down to greet them at their own height. "Welcome home," the elder sister said. The seasons turned, and the girls stayed longer than anyone had imagined. One season became two. Two became a year. A year became many years. The two young teachers built a small hall of bamboo and woven palm with their own hands. They cooked rice in large clay pots. They taught the girls to read the ancient teachings. They taught them gentle chants to sing at dawn. They braided hair in the mornings. They wiped tears in the afternoons. They sang old songs in the evenings until small heads leaned against small shoulders and the hall filled with the soft, steady breathing of sleep. The days grew their own quiet rhythm. In the early light, the girls swept the dirt floor with small straw brooms, laughing softly at each other. At midday, they sat in a circle, learning to form the old written letters on wax tablets, the youngest ones holding their reed styluses with fierce concentration and crooked, stubborn fingers. In the late afternoon, the two teachers would sit under the wide tree outside the hall and read aloud from the old Buddhist teachings. The girls draped over each other like sleepy cats, listening or not listening, absorbing it all the same. On warm evenings, when the cicadas began to sing and the first stars were appearing, the elder sister would sometimes sit on the step of the hall with a small girl curled against her side, and she would stroke the child's hair and say nothing at all. And the younger sister, watching from across the courtyard, would feel a deep and quiet happiness, a happiness that had nothing to do with mountains or retreats or scriptures, a happiness that simply arose from being where she was. One quiet afternoon, a traveler from a faraway land came to visit the nunnery. He had heard stories of these two young teachers and their unusual warmth, and he wished to sit with them for an afternoon. He brought a humble gift of tea wrapped in cloth, and they welcomed him into their modest hall. They spoke together about the Buddha's teachings. They spoke about the nature of kindness. And at one point, the traveler, moved by what he had been seeing around him, asked a question he meant as a kind one. "Dear sisters," he said gently, "do you ever feel sorrow about what was set aside? You were on your way to a great mountain retreat. You had dedicated so many years to the scriptures. You could have become some of the greatest teachers of your age. Do you ever regret that you are not now practicing as you had planned?" The two young women looked at him for a long moment. Their faces were soft, but also, somehow, quietly amused, as if he had asked something a little puzzling. The elder sister smiled first. "Not practicing?" she said quietly. "What do you mean, not practicing?" The traveler paused, uncertain how to answer. The younger sister reached out and placed her hand, with great tenderness, on his arm. "The Buddha has given us these 18 girls," she said. "What a beautiful practice it is." Just as she spoke those words, a small girl with bright pigtails came running across the floor and threw her arms around the young teacher's waist, laughing, hiding her face in the folds of her robe. The teacher laughed too, and placed her hand on the girl's head, without ever breaking her gaze from the traveler. "This one," she said warmly, "has been my teacher for 7 years now. She is very strict. She reminds me to be patient every single day." The little girl giggled and ran off again. The traveler sat there quite still. He had come expecting to find weary women who had sacrificed the life they had dreamed of. Instead, he found 2 luminous beings, surrounded by a small living garden of growing souls, radiating the very thing he had been searching for his whole life without being able to name it. Later, as he walked down the path away from the nunnery, the late afternoon sun was slanting through the trees. A soft wind moved in the branches above him, and he understood, in a way he had never understood before, that practice had never been somewhere else. It had never been in the retreat he was longing for, or in the special teacher he hoped to find, or in the perfect silence he had imagined waiting for him in the mountains. Practice had always been in what was given. This is the quiet heart of the Buddha's teaching, that the life we have is the life we are meant to practice with, not the life we wish we had, not the life we are still waiting for. This one. There is a verse in the Dhammapada, one of the most beloved collections of the Buddha's words, that goes something like this: "Live in joy, in love, even among those who are troubled. Live in health, in peace, even among those who are afflicted. Look within. Be still. Freed from fear and from grasping, come to know the sweet joy of living in the way." There is a spaciousness in these words, if we let ourselves feel them. The Buddha is not saying we must wait for the world around us to become gentler before we can be at peace. He is saying that the peace is already here, underneath the unexpected, underneath the change of plans, underneath the things we did not ask for. Most of us, when life shifts in a way we did not choose, feel a small tightening somewhere inside. We say to ourselves, "This is not what I wanted. This is not how it was supposed to go." And we resist. And in our resisting, we often miss the very thing that has come to teach us. But the 2 young teachers in the old story show us another way. They show us that when life changes, we can pause. We can breathe. We can look softly at what has arrived at our door, and we can ask a kinder question. Not, "Why is this happening?" but, "What is here?" Not, when will this be over? But, who do I become if I stay with this gently? In the Zen tradition, there is a lovely old story of a young monk who once asked his teacher, "What is the way?" The teacher answered simply, "Your everyday life. That is the way." The young monk was puzzled. He had expected something grand, something hidden, something reserved for those who had studied long and traveled far. But his teacher was quietly telling him the whole truth. The washing of the dishes is the way. The caring for the aging parent is the way. The sitting with the restless child is the way. The small, unglamorous moments, one after another, these are the temple. These are the retreat. These are the path. We do not need to go anywhere to find the heart of the Buddha's teachings. We only need to turn, with a softer gaze, toward what is already here. And if something has recently arrived in your life that you did not plan for, some small change or some quiet new weight, perhaps the story of the two young teachers and their 18 girls can sit beside you for a while. Perhaps it can whisper, very gently, that what has come is not taking you away from your real life. It is your real life, and it may be offering you something that could never have been found any other way. Let us rest here for a breath. Let that story settle wherever it wants to settle within you. When you are ready, we will walk on together. The Buddha once described our ordinary experience with a simple and startling word. He called it a dream. Not the dream of the night, but the dream of the day. The quiet fog of thoughts, memories, plans, and worries that moves through the mind from the moment we open our eyes to the moment we lay our heads down again. We are inside this dream almost every moment of our lives. And most of us, the Buddha gently said, do not yet know we are dreaming. There is a beloved old story about the Buddha himself. Soon after his awakening beneath the great fig tree, a few travelers passed him on the road. They stopped. They sensed something unusual about this quiet man sitting cross-legged by the path. And one of them asked, "Are you a god?" Another asked, "Are you a great teacher? Are you some kind of spirit?" The Buddha, smiling softly, answered with just one word. "Awake," he said. "I am awake." That single word lies at the heart of the Buddhist path. Not awake in the sense of having our eyes open. Awake in the sense of seeing, with clear and tender attention, what is truly happening inside our own hearts and minds. Most of us know this feeling, even if we have never put words to it. You are walking home from somewhere ordinary, and you arrive at your door, and you realize, suddenly, that you cannot remember any of the walk. The streets passed. The turns were taken. The body moved without you. Where were you for all those steps? You are sitting at the table with someone you love. They are telling you about their day. Your face is turned toward them. Your head nods at the right times. And yet some part of you is far away, already planning what you will say next, or replaying a worry from earlier. When they finally pause and look at you, you realize, with a small tenderness, that you have not truly heard them for several minutes. They were there. You were there. But somehow, you were not quite in the room. This is the dream the Buddha was speaking of. Nothing strange or exotic. Only this. The quiet way the mind drifts off into its own stories, its own long and convincing dramas, while the actual life of the moment flows past us. The Zen and Buddhist masters have always been gentle about this. They did not scold people for being lost in their thoughts. They noticed, with a great deal of compassion, that the mind naturally does this. It is what the mind does. The heart beats. The lungs breathe. The mind tells stories. This is its nature. What the old Buddhist teachers pointed to, again and again, was not the fact that we dream. It was the beautiful possibility that we can, at any moment, wake up. Not all the way. Not forever. Just a little. Just for this breath. And then, perhaps, for this one too. The whole path is quietly built from these small awakening moments, one after another, softly changing everything. Let us explore a story about a quiet farmer who, late in his life, finally sat to watch a shadow play. He was a hard-working man, known throughout his village for always being busy. His fields were tended. His animals were fed. His roof was mended the moment a leak appeared. But in all his years, he had never once sat down to enjoy the wandering storytellers who passed through his village every few seasons. The ones who set up their white cloth screens in the village square and cast the old tales in light and shadow long into the warm evenings. "What is the point?" he would say, waving his hand. "They are only shadows. It is not real." His wife would smile at him, softly, and go without him. But in the late summer of one particular year, something in him was quieter than usual. His children were grown. His fields were resting between harvests. His body, he noticed, had slowed with the years. And when the storyteller passed through the village one warm evening, his wife took his hand and said gently, "Come sit with me tonight. Just this once." And for once, he went. The village square was already filling when they arrived. Twilight was settling soft and blue over the rooftops. The smell of cooking fires drifted from the nearby homes, and the evening had that particular hush that comes when the day's work is finally laid down. Small children sat cross-legged near the front, whispering to each other. Old men leaned against the low stone wall behind the benches. Young people held babies against their shoulders, swaying gently. The farmer and his wife found a place on a wooden bench beside the other villagers. The lamp behind the white cloth screen was lit, and the storyteller, a man with a long and unhurried voice, began to speak. The shadows began to move. First came the figure of a young wanderer walking across a wide plain. Then came the figure of an old sage sitting beneath a spreading tree. Then came the figure of a gentle deer stepping carefully through a forest at dusk. The storyteller's voice rose and fell. The lamp flickered. The shadows shifted and danced upon the cloth. The farmer, who had always waved such things away, found himself leaning forward. The wanderer was lost. The sage was waiting. The deer watched from the edge of the trees, ears alert. Something in the farmer's chest tightened, then loosened. He forgot his hands resting on his knees. He forgot the wooden bench beneath him. He forgot even the gentle breath of his wife sitting close beside him. He was with the wanderer now, walking across the plain. He was the wanderer, lost, searching, tired. When the wanderer at last found the old sage beneath the tree and knelt before him, the farmer discovered, to his great surprise, that his own eyes were wet. The story lasted perhaps an hour. When it ended, the villagers clapped softly, in the way people clap when something has touched them without breaking the spell. And then, in an old tradition of that village, the storyteller stepped out from behind the screen to bow. He gently took down the white cloth, and because there were children in the audience, he showed them where the lamp was, and how the wooden puppets on their slender sticks had been casting the shadows, and how a small flame and a skilled hand could make a whole world appear. The farmer watched very carefully. He watched the storyteller lift the puppet of the young wanderer. Small, plain, only a flat piece of carved wood, painted in a few soft colors. He watched the storyteller turn the puppet in his hand. From one angle, it looked once again like a wanderer on a plain. From another angle, it was only a piece of wood on a stick. He watched the lamp. Only a lamp. A strange feeling came over him then. A kind of quiet astonishment. All evening, his heart had traveled with the wanderer. His breath had tightened and released. His eyes had filled with tears. And yet, all along, it had been only shadows cast by a small flame and a few pieces of carved wood. It had been only light and shape and voice. He walked home slowly with his wife that night, saying very little. The stars were coming out above the fields, one by one, and the village was settling into sleep. A quiet wind moved through the grasses. Somewhere in the distance, a single dog barked, then fell silent. "What did you think?" she asked eventually, her voice warm. The farmer was quiet for a long time. He was thinking of all the years he had spent inside his own worries, his own plans, his own replayings of things said and unsaid. All the times he had tightened in his chest over something he could not even now remember. All the times he had been somewhere other than where his feet were standing. "I think," he said at last, "that my own mind has been casting shadows my whole life." His wife looked at him, surprised. "And I have been weeping over them," he said softly, as though they were real. She reached for his hand as they walked, and did not say anything. Sometimes the deepest recognitions arrive in silence. Sometimes the kindest thing to do is simply to walk beside the one who is beginning to see. They reached their small home. He paused at the door and looked up at the stars for a moment longer than usual. Then he went inside and laid down and slept more peacefully than he had in many years. This is the quiet recognition the Buddha was pointing to long ago under his great tree. The thoughts that pass through our minds are real in their own way. They arise. They move us. They can make us laugh or worry or wonder. But they are not the solid, unchanging truth we often take them to be. They are closer to the shadows on the screen, cast by the gentle lamp of awareness, shifting with every small flicker of attention. The trouble is not that we have thoughts. The trouble, if we can even call it that, is that we forget, almost every moment, that thoughts are only thoughts. We take them as absolute news about who we are, about who others are, about what the world must surely be. And we grow tight. We argue with what is happening inside us. We weep over shadows. But any moment, without making any noise about it, we can remember. Here is a thought about tomorrow, a thought about something someone said, only a thought. Here is a feeling of worry, a feeling of restlessness, a feeling of tenderness rising for no reason, only a feeling. When we remember, even briefly, we do not make the thoughts or feelings disappear. The shadows continue to dance upon the screen, but something important shifts. We remember that we are the one watching. We remember the lamp. We remember the soft silence behind the cloth. The Buddha once offered a gentle image for this kind of seeing. He said that a well-trained mind is similar to a still pool of water on a clear morning. Everything that passes around the pool is reflected in it, but the pool itself remains undisturbed. Trees are reflected. Birds are reflected. Passing clouds are reflected. And the water holds it all, without grasping any of it, without turning any of it away. This stillness is not a faraway thing. It is our own natural mind, beneath the shadow play. It is already here, already in us, quietly waiting for us to notice. And when we do notice, even for a single breath, something softens. The grip of the story loosens. The shoulders drop a little. The body remembers where it is. We come back into the room we never truly left. The cup of tea on the table. The sound of the evening outside. The warmth of our own hands. All of it becomes real again because we are here to meet it. The Zen masters sometimes speak of this as returning home without ever having gone anywhere. It is a strange and lovely phrase when we sit with it. We were never actually lost. We had only forgotten, for a while, where we were standing. And the moment we remember, we are already home. There is no need to stop the stories inside. They will continue whether we wish them to or not, and many of them are lovely, and some of them are important, and most of them are simply passing through. We only have to remember, now and then, that we are the one watching. And in that small, kind remembering, a little light returns to the room of our life. A little silence returns to the heart. A small part of the dream, so gently, begins to lift. Let us settle here for a moment. Let the breath be as it is. There is no hurry at all. When it feels right, we will continue on together. There is something most of us have felt, though we rarely speak of it. A certain quiet that sometimes arrives without being called. Standing in the kitchen early in the morning, before anyone else is awake. Walking alone on a familiar path at the end of the day. Sitting with a dear friend when the conversation falls into an easy hush. In those small moments, a deeper silence opens inside us, and we feel, for just a breath, as though we have come home to something. And then the moment passes. The world returns, with its sounds and its small tasks. The silence seems to slip away, and we find ourselves thinking, if only I could get back there. If only I could stay inside that quiet a little longer. The Buddha and the Zen masters who came after him would smile softly at this thought. They would tell us something that, at first, is hard to believe. They would say that the silence never actually went anywhere. It is still here. It has always been here. We are the ones who wander from it, over and over, and then wonder where it has gone. The old Buddhist tradition has a gentle name for this hidden quiet. They call it our original mind, the soft presence that lies underneath the chatter of thought. Not something we need to build, as a potter shapes a pot. Not something we need to earn, as a merchant earns a coin. It is already here. We are already in it. We are swimming in it, as a fish swims in water, mostly without noticing. Think for a moment of an early morning, before the street outside has fully woken, before the birds have finished their first songs. There is a particular hush to the world at that hour. It has not been made by anyone. It is simply there. When we step into it, we do not construct it. We only notice that it has been waiting for us all along. The Buddha once said something remarkable to one of his students. The student had been practicing for a long time, searching with all his heart for awakening, walking each day as if climbing toward some distant mountain peak. And one afternoon the student, weary and a little discouraged, turned to the Buddha and asked, "Teacher, how much further is it? How long until I arrive?" The Buddha, with great tenderness, answered, "You are standing on it." Let us explore a story about a young seeker from an earlier age who left his small home to find a great Zen master who lived far away in the mountains. He had grown up in a quiet village, in a simple wooden home with a small courtyard, a well, a low bench, and a single plum tree by the gate. He was a thoughtful young man, full of deep questions. What is silence? Where does peace come from? What is the true nature of this mind I carry with me everywhere? His elders, when he asked them these things, would smile gently and say, "These are fine questions. Perhaps you should go and seek a teacher." So he packed a small bag. He took a little rice, a little cloth, a single wooden bowl, and the walking stick his grandfather had once carved. And he set out for the mountains, where a very old Zen master was said to live in a hermitage at the edge of a long pine forest. The journey took him many seasons. He crossed wide plains where the grasses rolled in the wind. He walked beside quiet rivers where herons stood still among the reeds. He slept under wayside shelters and was welcomed by kind strangers who shared their rice and their stories. He grew thinner. His beard grew longer. His eyes grew a little older. At last, in the late autumn of one year, he arrived at the foot of a great mountain. He asked the villagers nearby about the master, and they pointed up a steep, winding path. "He is there," they said. "But he is strange. Do not be surprised at what he says to you." The seeker climbed for a day and a night. The air grew thin. The pines grew tall. And at last he reached a small clearing where a tiny hut stood, soft smoke curling from its chimney. He knelt before the door and waited. After a long while, the door opened and the master stood there. He was a small, round-faced old man with bright eyes and quiet hands. He looked at the seeker for what felt like a very long time. "Why have you come?" the master asked at last. "Master," the seeker said, his voice shaking a little with emotion, "I have come from a great distance. I have traveled many seasons to find you. I wish to understand the silence of the mind. I wish to know the deep peace the Buddha spoke of. Please, teach me." The master looked at him with tender amusement. "Go home," he said. The seeker blinked. "I am sorry, master. I do not think I heard you correctly." "Go home," the master said again, more gently this time. "What you are looking for is not here." "But master," the seeker said, "I have come so far. I have left everything behind. Surely you can teach me something. Surely there is some method, some practice, some secret you can give me." The master smiled and reached out and rested his hand on the seeker's shoulder. "The only secret I can give you," he said softly, "is that you are already carrying it. Go home. Sit in your own courtyard. Drink tea from your own cup. Look at the plum tree by your own gate. The silence you are seeking is waiting there. It has been waiting your whole life." And with that, the master bowed, stepped back into his hut, and closed the door. The seeker stood there for a long time, not knowing what to do. He had spent many seasons traveling. He had slept in strange places. He had worn down the soles of his sandals. He had carried questions in his chest that grew heavier every year. And now the great master he had imagined for so long had simply told him to go home. At first, walking back down the mountain, the seeker was angry. Then he was confused. Then he was tired. And then, after many days of walking, he grew quiet. By the time he reached his own small village again, more seasons had passed. His home was just as he had left it. The plum tree stood by the gate. The wooden bench sat by the door. The clay cup he had drunk from as a boy was still there on the low shelf inside. An old neighbor saw him coming down the path and waved. "You have been gone a long time," she called out warmly. "Did you find what you were looking for?" The seeker smiled, a little tired. "I am not sure yet, grandmother. Ask me tomorrow." He stepped into the courtyard, and something happened. He sat down on the old wooden bench. He looked at the plum tree and noticed the small white blossoms opening on its branches. He heard the quiet sound of a single bee moving through the flowers. He felt the warmth of the late afternoon sun on the back of his hands. The tiles beneath his feet were the same tiles he had walked across 1,000 times as a boy. The well in the corner made the same soft creak it had always made when the wind moved the old wooden handle. A single white butterfly lifted from the edge of a flower pot and drifted across the courtyard, unhurried, as if it had been waiting for him to arrive. And, without warning, a great stillness opened inside him. It was not something he had done. He had not chanted a single chant. He had not closed his eyes to meditate. He had simply sat down in his own small courtyard and taken a soft breath, and the silence had opened like a flower that had been closed for a long time, but had never, for a single moment, stopped being a flower. He began to weep, softly, with quiet wonder. The master had told him the truth. The silence had been here all along. It had been here on the day he left, packing his bag with such seriousness. It had been here during all his travels, while he climbed hills and crossed rivers, searching so hard for what he was already carrying. It had been here the day he knelt before the master's small hut. It had been here every single moment, without interruption, without any effort from him at all. He had just not been still enough to notice. The next morning, the old neighbor came by the gate with a warm bowl of porridge, because that was how things were done in that village when someone returned from a long journey. "Well?" she said, smiling. "Did you find what you were looking for?" The seeker took the bowl in both hands and bowed his head a little. "I did, grandmother," he said, "but not in the place I went to find it." She nodded, as though she had known this all along, and turned away to walk back down the lane. This is one of the tender secrets the Zen and Buddhist traditions have been gently passing down for thousands of years. The silence we long for is not hiding from us. It is closer than our own breath, closer than the sound of our own heart. It is the quiet presence underneath all our thinking, all our planning, all our wandering, and it is already complete. We do not have to travel to find it. We only have to stop for a moment and remember it was here. The Buddha described it with a simple image. He said our awareness is like a clear sky. Thoughts come and go across it, clouds of worry, clouds of memory, clouds of anticipation. But the sky itself remains. It does not become the clouds. It does not vanish when the clouds gather. It is always the same open, quiet sky, no matter what passes through it. Sometimes the clouds are very thick, and we forget that the sky is there. We believe the clouds are all there is. But the sky has not gone anywhere. The moment we remember to look past the clouds, we see it, exactly as it was, exactly as it has always been. There is something tender about all this. It means we have not been failing all these years when our mind has felt busy and full. The sky was never missing. It was simply hidden from view for a while. And the remembering of it is a very gentle thing. Nothing dramatic. Nothing we have to prepare for. Only a soft, inner turning. A small glance upward, and suddenly the stars are there above us, patient and bright, exactly as they have always been. It means too that we have never truly been alone. The silence that has been with us since we were children is still with us. The quiet presence that held us at our first breath holds us now. It is older than any worry we have ever carried. It is wider than any plan we have ever made. And it is closer than anything we have ever gone searching for. This evening, as you are listening, you are already inside that quiet. You may feel it clearly, or you may not. It makes no real difference. The silence does not require your belief. It is here, softly, beneath everything, waiting without the slightest impatience. You have not been far from home. You have only, sometimes, been looking in another direction. And now, for this gentle hour, you are turning softly back. Let us pause together here. Let the body rest. Let the breath be slow. When the moment feels right, we will go on. The Buddha often taught by way of small, ordinary things. He pointed to a handful of rice, to a worn sandal, to a well at midday. He knew, as the Zen masters would remind us again and again after him, that the deepest wisdom is usually hidden in the simplest of gestures. And among the simplest gestures of all, perhaps the most quietly wise, is the gesture of tending. To tend is to care for something without rushing it, to be present to something without controlling it, to watch over something with open hands rather than tight ones. A parent tends to a sleeping child. A gardener tends to a garden. A cook tends to a simmering pot. A friend tends to another friend's sorrow, not by fixing it, but by sitting close while it slowly moves through. The old Buddhist teachers spoke of this gentle quality as wise and caring attention. They had a phrase for it, handed down for over 2,000 years in the ancient language of the texts. It means attention held with tenderness, attention that makes room, attention that does not grasp or push. This is the kind of attention that quietly changes a life. Most of us, when we first come to the quieter parts of our lives, approach them the same way we have been taught to approach everything else. We try to fix them. We try to improve them. We try to master them. We arrive at our meditation, or at our soft evening, or at our gentle conversation, and we bring with us the same forceful hands we use for the rest of our day. And we find, often to our surprise, that forceful hands do not work here. When we press too hard on a quiet moment, the quiet slips away. When we grab at our own thoughts and try to force them away, they only grow stronger. When we push ourselves to feel calm, we become tight. There is something in the inner life that cannot be shoved or commanded. It can only be invited. And the invitation is the art of tending. In the Zen tradition, there is a saying that the heart and mind are like a small bird. If you try to catch it in your fist, it will flutter away. But if you sit very still with your hand open, offering a few grains of rice, it may come of its own quiet choosing and rest beside you for a while. Let us explore a story about an old gardener and her young granddaughter, who spent one long summer together learning the gentle art of tending a garden. The grandmother was a woman of many quiet years. She lived in a small stone cottage at the edge of a village, with a wide garden stretching out behind it, full of herbs and vegetables and climbing flowers. She had planted and tended that garden for more decades than her granddaughter had been alive. Neighbors would sometimes stop at her gate just to look, because her garden was a place where things seemed to grow almost blessed, as if the plants themselves were glad to be there. Her granddaughter, who came to stay for a long summer that year, was a bright and eager child, 8 or 9 years old, full of questions, full of energy. She wanted, more than anything, to help her grandmother in the garden. On her very first morning, she ran outside with a small wooden bucket and a tiny shovel. "Grandmother, what shall we do? What shall we plant? Can I plant something now?" The grandmother smiled and wiped her hands slowly on her apron. "Let us walk through the garden first," she said, "and see what is already here." They walked the rows slowly together. The grandmother showed her the basil leaves, pinched a single leaf between her fingers, and let the child breathe in its sweet green scent. She showed her the tomato plants, tall and leaning. She showed her the small curled tendrils of a bean plant climbing a wooden stake. They crouched together to look at a row of lettuce seedlings, so small they were barely a breath. "These are very young," the grandmother said. "We will tend them today." The child looked puzzled. "But what will we do to them, grandmother?" "Mostly we will look at them," the grandmother said, smiling. "We will water them a little if they are thirsty. We will pull the tiny weeds that have come too close. And then we will leave them alone." "That is all?" said the child. "That is all," said the grandmother. "That is gardening." The child looked just a little disappointed. She had imagined something grander. She had imagined herself pushing back great piles of earth, hauling water, planting whole rows of seeds in heroic labor. Not this small, quiet-looking, but she was a good and patient child, and she trusted her grandmother, and so she helped where she was asked, and watched where she was asked to watch. For several days, the child grew impatient. She wanted the seedlings to be taller. She wanted the tomatoes to turn red. She found herself leaning over the little lettuce plants one warm afternoon and saying, in a very serious voice, "Hurry up, please. Grow faster." Her grandmother, coming up behind her just then, laughed gently. "Little one, what are you doing?" "I am trying to help them grow faster, grandmother." The grandmother sat down on a low stone beside the lettuce row and patted the ground next to her. The child sat down. "May I tell you a small secret about gardens?" The grandmother said. "Yes, please." "You cannot make a plant grow," the grandmother said. "No one can. Not a king. Not a priest. Not a farmer with 50 years of experience. a plant grows according to its own quiet nature. What we can do, and all we can do, is care for it. We can make sure it has water. We can make sure it has good earth. We can make sure the weeds do not choke it. We can stand beside it and notice it and wish it well. And then, in its own time, it grows. The child looked at the lettuce seedlings, thoughtful now. So we are not making them grow. No, little one. We are only making room for them. The child was quiet for a long moment. She watched a small ant move along the edge of the stone. She felt the warm sun on the back of her neck. "Grandmother," she said finally, "is that true about people too?" The grandmother smiled and reached out and tucked a strand of the child's hair behind her ear. "Especially about people, little one. Especially about you." The summer went on. The child learned, slowly, the pleasure of doing less, of kneeling beside a plant without rushing it, of watering gently, of pulling a single weed and then pausing to look at the whole row, of standing up and simply watching the garden breathe. She learned to sit on the low stone bench at the end of the day and notice the pink sky above the far hills. She learned that the bees came and went on their own schedule, and that the plum tree did not need her opinion about when to fruit, and that the small birds could find their own worms without her help. She learned, in her quiet child's way, that gardening was not something you did to a garden. It was something you did with it. There was one afternoon, near the middle of that summer, that the child would remember for the rest of her life. A sudden rain had come and gone, and the garden was glistening. The grandmother and the child were kneeling side by side, looking at the lettuce row, which had grown now into full, tender leaves. The child reached out, very slowly, and touched one of the leaves with a single fingertip. "Grandmother," she said quietly, "I think they knew we were being patient with them." The grandmother laughed softly. "Perhaps they did, little one. Perhaps they did." And the child felt, for the first time in her young life, the small and wonderful feeling of being in on a secret that the whole world somehow quietly shared. By the end of the summer, her grandmother's garden had grown lush and heavy with the last harvests. But something else had also grown, more quietly. The child herself had grown slower. She had grown more watchful. She had grown a little more patient with the plants and with herself and with the world as she found it. On the last morning of her visit, the grandmother took her small hand and led her to the garden one final time. They stood together at the gate, looking out across the rows of green. "Little one," the grandmother said softly, "when you go home, the garden of your heart will also need tending. It is the same work. You cannot make yourself grow faster. You cannot make the harder parts of you disappear by shouting at them. All you can do is water yourself gently, clear a little space, and wait, with kindness, for what wants to grow." The child nodded, tears rising in her eyes for reasons she could not have named. And she never, through all the long years of her life, forgot. This is the gentle quality of attention the Buddha and his students pointed to. Not a forceful attention, not a demanding attention, a tending attention, the kind of attention that makes room for things. There is a beautiful Buddhist image sometimes offered for this quality. It is the image of cupping your hands around a small warm egg you have found, not knowing yet what is inside, not rushing it, not squeezing it, only keeping it safe, only keeping it warm. This, the old Buddhist teachers would quietly say, is how we hold our own inner life. With gentle hands, with patient presence, with a soft willingness to let whatever is inside emerge in its own time. There is something freeing in this. We do not have to make ourselves into anything. We do not have to push our hearts to be calmer than they are in this moment. We do not have to hurry our own healing, or hurry our own understanding, or hurry our own quiet joy. We can simply tend. We can cup the heart in our hands and trust, softly, that what is good in us is already growing beneath the surface in its own good time. The Buddha himself compared the human heart to a lotus. Some lotuses, he said, are still deep beneath the water, their petals closed. Some are rising through the water, not yet at the surface. Some are just breaking into the open air. And some have bloomed, full and bright, in the morning sun. All of them are on the same journey. All of them are beautiful at every stage. The one beneath the water is not less of a lotus. It is only in an earlier part of its own unfolding. There is something deeply kind in this teaching. It says that wherever we find ourselves this evening, we are not behind. We are not ahead. We are exactly in our own season. The parts of us that feel tangled, or tired, or unfinished are not signs of failure. They are simply the leaves not yet opened, the blossom still folded inward, patient in its own quiet time. So it is with every one of us. Sometimes, this evening, you may find yourself wishing you were further along on some inner path, wishing you were calmer, wishing you were freer, wishing you were more awake than you feel tonight. And when that small wishing arises, perhaps you can remember the grandmother at her garden gate. Perhaps you can cup your own heart, just for a moment, in gentle hands, and let it be exactly as it is. Nothing is being pushed. Nothing is being rushed. You are both the garden and the gardener, and the summer sun is falling softly across both. Let us pause here easily. Let the body grow a little softer. Let the breath slow. When you are ready, we will go on together. If you have ever tried to fall asleep by telling yourself very firmly that you must fall asleep right now, you already know something important about how the inner life works. The more forcefully you command yourself to sleep, the more stubbornly awake you become. The harder you insist on feeling calm, the more restless the mind seems to grow. Something about the forcing itself pushes away the very thing you are reaching for. The Buddha noticed this truth long ago. He made it one of the gentle cornerstones of his teaching. He called it the middle way. And it is, at heart, the art of caring about something without grasping it. The art of effort without strain. The art of steady attention held in quiet balance. Before his awakening, the Buddha himself had spent many years living as a very strict ascetic. He ate almost nothing. He slept almost nothing. He pushed himself to extreme limits, thinking that if he could only master his body and mind by sheer force, he would break through into liberation. Many others were with him in those days, all of them doing the same, all of them convinced that the harder the struggle, the closer the truth. But one morning, sitting by the side of a river, weakened and weary, he looked down into the water. The morning light was soft on the surface. The river moved unhurried beside him, turning slowly around a bend. His face had grown thin. His body was bowed, and something inside him understood quietly, that this was not the way. He remembered, just then, a moment from his childhood. He had been sitting in the cool shade of a rose apple tree while his father worked nearby in a field. The air had been fragrant. A small breeze had moved the leaves above him, and without trying, without effort, without anyone teaching him, a deep and natural peace had settled over him. He had simply been there, a small boy beneath a tree, and he had been happy. There is no freedom in the forcing, he thought to himself, watching the water. And there is no freedom in the giving up. The truth must lie somewhere between. He accepted a small bowl of rice milk from a kind villager passing by. The warmth of it spread through his weakened body. He sat down beneath a great tree, and for the first time in many long years, he allowed himself to simply be present, without pushing, without fighting, without collapsing. It was there, in that gentle balance, that the Buddha awakened. This middle way is not only a teaching for monks and forest masters, it is for everyone. It is the quiet wisdom of how to hold anything precious. A difficult conversation, a tender hope, a young friendship, a simmering soup, a sleeping child, a moment of silence at the end of a long day. Everything in life asks of us a certain kind of touch. Not too tight, not too loose, just steady, just warm, just present. Most of us, in our own way, have already tasted this. We know how it feels to grip something too hard and lose it. We know how it feels to neglect something and watch it quietly wither. We live, much of the time, between these two poles, leaning first one way, then the other. The middle way is the gentle center we are always returning to, sometimes without even knowing. The Buddha gave one of his most beautiful teachings about this to a young student who had grown discouraged. Let us sit with that small story now. Let us explore a story about a young man who came to study with the Buddha long ago, and the kind question he received when his heart had grown weary. Before he had become a seeker, he had been a gifted musician. He had played the lute beautifully at courts and in villages, and his music had been loved wherever he went. But he had come to feel, over time, that music alone was not enough for the deeper questions of his heart. And so he had set aside his instrument and come to sit at the feet of the Buddha. He was an earnest student. He meditated for many hours each day. He rose before dawn. He sat long into the night. He pushed himself with great effort, quietly determined to arrive at what he was seeking. And for many months, he felt that he was making progress. But then, as sometimes happens, his heart grew discouraged. His sitting felt dry. His mind felt stubborn. His body felt tired. No matter how hard he tried, nothing seemed to soften. He watched the other students around him in the meditation hall. Some of them seemed calm. Some of them seemed full of quiet joy. Some of them seemed to rest inside themselves with an ease he could not find. And the more he watched them, the more convinced he became that something was wrong with him. He must not be trying hard enough. He must not be disciplined enough. He must be missing some secret the others had been given. And so he pushed himself harder. He gave up sleep. He gave up rest. He walked the paths of the monastery with tight shoulders and a tight jaw. He was determined, through sheer force, to break through. But the harder he pushed, the further the peace seemed to slip away. One morning, he came to the Buddha, with tears rising in his eyes. "Master," he said, "I do not know what I am doing wrong. I am trying as hard as I can. I am sitting longer. I am pushing through my tiredness. I am working harder than anyone I know. But nothing is opening. I feel further from the truth than when I began. Perhaps I am not made for this path." The Buddha looked at him with great kindness. He did not scold. He did not correct. He simply smiled softly and asked a gentle question. "Tell me," the Buddha said, "when you were a musician, do you remember how to tune your lute?" The young man looked up, surprised. "Yes, Master. Of course." "When you tuned the strings too tightly," the Buddha asked, "what would happen?" The young man thought for a moment. "The strings would snap, Master. They could not hold such tension. No music could come from them." "And when the strings were too loose," the Buddha asked, "what would happen then?" The young man smiled a little, remembering. "Then there was no music either. The strings would simply hang there, without voice. I could pluck them, and only a dull sound would come." "And when the strings were just right?" the Buddha asked softly. "Then, Master," the young man said, his eyes growing clearer, "the music was beautiful. It was almost effortless. The strings sang as though they themselves wanted to sing." The Buddha nodded and reached out and placed his hand very gently on the young man's shoulder. "So it is with the effort of your practice, my friend. And so it is with the effort of your whole life. If you pull the strings of yourself too tight, you will snap. If you leave them too loose, there will be no music. But if you find the gentle middle, where the heart is tuned neither too hard nor too soft, the music of your awakening will rise of its own kind nature." The young man looked at the Buddha for a long moment. Something inside him, which had been clenched for months, quietly relaxed. He bowed deeply and returned to his cushion and sat down once more. But this time he did not push. He did not strain. He simply breathed. And, as though it had been waiting patiently all along, the music began to rise in him. Later, on a warm evening some weeks after that morning, he sat alone under a small tree and watched the first stars appearing one by one above the horizon. A soft wind moved through the grasses around him. He thought back to all his months of forcing, all the early mornings of clenched effort, all the late nights of grim determination, and he laughed very quietly to himself. He had come to the Buddha looking for some impossible technique, some secret method, some exhausting path, and instead the Buddha had given him back his own lute. This is the secret the Buddha offered his student that morning, and the secret the Zen and Buddhist masters have been quietly offering ever since. Not too tight, not too loose, just enough care, just enough softness, just enough trust that the music is already there and needs only gentle tuning to rise. The Buddha once told another image for this quality, an image of a goldsmith at her small fire. A fine goldsmith, shaping a precious piece of gold, does not hold it in the flame all day long, for the gold would burn and grow brittle. She does not pull it out and leave it, for it would harden and refuse to shape. She works with a quiet rhythm, a little heat, a little cooling, a little watching, a little tapping, a little pause, and slowly, with patience, the gold becomes something luminous, something that could never have been made by force nor by neglect. If you have ever watched someone at such careful work, you will know there is a kind of peaceful attention in their face. They are not hurrying. They are not worried. They are simply present to what is in front of them, checking its color, feeling its warmth, listening to the small sounds it makes. They have done this many times before. They trust the process. They trust themselves. And because they trust, they do not push. This is how the Buddhist tradition invites us to hold our own inner life, with the gentle attention of a goldsmith at her bench, with the steady warmth of someone tending a small fire on a cool evening. Not too much, not too little. A soft rhythm held with care. Sometimes, in our own days, we forget this. We push ourselves too hard and wonder why we feel brittle. We let ourselves drift too long and wonder why nothing feels alive. We swing between forcing and giving up and lose the gentle middle where things actually grow. Perhaps you have felt this in your own life, a certain tiredness that comes from trying too hard for too long, or a certain dullness that comes from having stopped trying altogether. It is a very human thing. The Buddha never scolded his students for falling into these patterns. He only, over and over, pointed back to the middle, to the steady warmth, to the soft attention, to the kind of care that bends neither into strain nor into neglect. And then, sometimes, in a quiet evening such as this one, we remember. We remember that the truest effort does not feel like effort at all. It feels like care. It is the quiet tending we give to anything we love. It is the soft attention of a goldsmith who has done this work many times before and trusts the fire and trusts the gold and trusts her own steady hands. There is no hurry. There is no need to push. The middle way is right here, beneath every breath, inviting us back into its gentle balance. So, if you find your shoulders tight tonight, let them soften. If your breath feels held, let it release in its own time. If your mind is pushing for some outcome, let it set that down, just for now. This evening is not something to be earned. It is something to be received. The strings of you do not need to be pulled tighter. They do not need to be pulled looser. They are already, beneath everything, tuned to the gentle music of this quiet hour. Let us pause here, together. Let the hands rest. Let the face soften. When the moment feels right, we will continue. Imagine, for a moment, a pool in a forest. Not a grand lake, not a rushing stream. Just a small, clear pool, tucked quietly among the roots of old trees, fed by some gentle underground spring. The sky is perfectly mirrored in its surface. The tops of the tall pines reflect in it as though they were growing upside down into another world. A single leaf falls and drifts slowly across the water. A small bird dips its beak at the edge and drinks. The pool does nothing. It simply is. And yet everything comes to it. This image lies at the heart of one of the most beloved teachings in the Buddhist forest tradition, passed down gently from one forest master to the next for many hundreds of years. A teaching so soft, so unhurried, that many people miss it on the first hearing. But when we sit with it long enough, it begins to open something inside us that no amount of striving could have opened on its own. The teaching goes something like this. One of the great forest masters of Buddhism, after many years of living in the forest himself, said that the mind, when it is tended gently over time, becomes like a clear pool in the woods. And when the mind becomes such a pool, all manner of wonderful and rare creatures begin to come to drink. The fears we have long buried come softly to the edge of the water. The griefs we have quietly carried come to drink. The tender memories, the small forgotten joys, the unexpected insights, all begin to step out from the forest of our inner life and show themselves, unafraid, at the water's edge. And if we are still enough, if we are patient enough, we see them all. We see the truth of our own mind. We see, the forest master said, with great peace. But he added something important. You cannot force the pool to become still. You cannot shout at the water and command it to settle. You cannot wave your hands over its surface and insist that the reflections be clear. The pool becomes still only when it is left alone, when nothing is being thrown into it, when no one is stirring it. And so it is, the Buddhist tradition tells us, with the human heart. Let us explore a story about two dear old friends who met again, after many long years apart, beside a clear pool in an ancient forest. They had grown up together in the same small town as young girls. They had dreamed together and laughed together and walked to school together. But then life had taken them in different directions. One of them had married and worked hard and raised children and become deeply woven into the busy rhythms of her growing town. The other had felt drawn, from her earliest years, to the quiet of the forest. She had gone to live at the edge of a great woodland, in a small wooden hut, beside an old Buddhist shrine that had been tended for many generations. There she lived simply. There she sat. There she listened to the wind moving through the pines. Many years passed. The friend in the town grew weary with all her busyness. She had not lost her way, exactly, but she had lost some of herself. Her days had grown crowded. Her evenings had grown short. Her mind, she noticed with a quiet sadness, had not been truly still for a very long time. And one year, in a late autumn, she wrote to her friend and said, "May I come and stay with you for a little while? I do not know exactly what I need, but I think I need what you have." Her friend wrote back right away, "Come." She arrived at the edge of the forest after a long journey, and her friend met her on the path and took her bag and led her quietly to the small wooden hut. For the first few days, they simply sat together. They cooked simple meals. They took short walks among the trees. The visiting friend kept waiting for some deep teaching to begin, for her friend to say something wise, to offer her a word that would fix what felt tangled inside. But nothing came. Only quiet. Only the crackling of the small cooking fire. Only the sound of the wind through the branches. On the fourth morning, the forest friend said softly, "Come, let me show you something." And she led the visitor by a quiet, winding path into the deeper part of the forest. They walked for perhaps an hour. The trees grew taller. The light grew softer. And then, in a small clearing, they came upon a pool. It was not a grand thing. It was only a pool, round and clear, fed by a small spring that trickled in from one side. Moss grew around its stones. Tall trees leaned gently over it. The water was so still that the sky overhead was perfectly mirrored in it. Clouds, a single bird passing high above, the lacework of bare branches against pale blue. "This is the pool," her friend said. "What pool?" the visitor asked, confused. "The one I come to every morning. The one that has taught me more than any teacher." The visitor looked at the water and waited for something to happen. The forest friend sat down on a small stone beside the pool and folded her hands in her lap. "Sit with it for a while," she said simply. "Just sit." So the visiting friend sat. At first, she was restless. Her thoughts were loud. She was wondering when they would go back. She was running through a mental list of things she had left undone at home. She was replaying small irritations from her busy days. The pool seemed just a pool. The trees seemed just trees. But her friend sat so still beside her, and the forest was so quiet that slowly, almost against her will, she began to settle. An hour passed, or perhaps it was longer. Time itself grew uncertain in that clearing. A small bird came to the edge of the pool, dipped its beak twice, and lifted softly away. The water rippled and then grew still again. A gentle doe stepped out from the trees on the far side of the clearing. She looked at the two women across the water for a long moment, unafraid, and then lowered her head to drink. The surface of the pool trembled upward with each quiet lap of her tongue. When she was done, she turned and walked back into the trees without hurry. A blue dragonfly landed on a nearby leaf, sat for a breath, and flew. And the visiting friend, without even meaning to, began to cry. Not a hard cry, a soft, cleansing cry, like rain finding its own way to the ground after a long dry season. Something old and tight inside her was letting go at last. Her forest friend reached out, without a word, and placed a warm hand on her back. After a long time, the visitor whispered, "What is happening to me?" Her friend smiled, quietly. "The pool is doing what it does," she said. "It is letting you become still." "But I did not do anything," the visitor said, bewildered. "No," her friend said softly. "That is the whole secret." They sat together until the sun moved across the clearing and began to slant gold through the trees. Neither of them spoke again. There was nothing more to say. In the days that followed, the visitor began to walk to the pool alone. Her friend did not stop her. She only smiled each morning when she saw her lacing her walking sandals at the door of the hut. "Go gently," her friend would say. "Take your time." And the visitor would go along the quiet, winding path through the deepening part of the forest to sit by the pool. Sometimes she stayed an hour, sometimes longer. She brought nothing with her. She did not read. She did not plan. She simply sat. She began to notice, over those quiet days, that her own mind was slowly beginning to mirror the pool itself. The thoughts still came, as the wind still came through the trees. Small worries, small memories, small hopes. But they no longer seemed to stir up the water the way they once had. They moved across her awareness, touched the surface, and passed. One afternoon, sitting alone by the pool, she noticed a small thing she had never noticed before. A soft happiness, quiet and full, rising in her chest. No reason, no cause. It was simply there, as though it had always been waiting underneath the busyness of her life and had finally been given enough stillness to come to the surface. She laughed, softly, with tears in her eyes. She did not tell her friend that afternoon. Some things do not need to be spoken. When she returned home to her busy town a few weeks later, something had changed in her. The demands had not changed. The to-do lists had not grown shorter. Her days were as full as they had been before. But something inside her had learned how to return, again and again, to the clear pool underneath everything. And on the hardest days, when the water of her life felt stirred, she would close her eyes for just a moment and remember the doe stepping out from the trees and the dragonfly on the leaf and her friend's warm hand on her back. And the pool would begin, ever so slowly, to settle again. This is the gentle gift of the forest pool and the gentle gift of the Buddhist forest tradition itself. We do not have to work at stillness. We do not have to build it or earn it or force our way into it. We only have to stop stirring the water of our lives for a little while. We only have to sit and breathe and allow. And what needs to come to the surface, what needs to be seen, what needs to be softly tended, begins to arrive on its own, unafraid, and without our needing to chase it. The Buddha himself spoke of this with great tenderness. He said that when the mind becomes clear, it becomes a friend to all beings. Not because the mind has gone somewhere else to become clear, but because the mind, left alone, gently settles. Left alone, gently clarifies. Left alone, gently softens. It is the water's own nature to return to stillness. And it is our own nature too. We have been stirring the pool of ourselves for so long that we have almost come to believe that the stirring is the only thing keeping the water alive. But stirred water is not more alive. Stirred water is only cloudy. Still water is the home of many things. The trees are reflected in it. The sky lives in it. The gentle creatures come to drink from it. All of this because the water is quiet enough to receive. This evening, you are being invited into your own forest pool, not somewhere else. Here, in your own chest, in your own breath, in the soft rise and fall of this quiet hour. You do not have to do anything at all to become still. You only have to stop adding things to the water for a little while. Stop rehearsing tomorrow. Stop arguing with yesterday. Stop pushing at the surface of the mind with so many small demands. And slowly, in its own time, the pool settles. And in the quiet that follows, something wonderful begins. The small birds come. The gentle deer step out from the trees. The soft truths of your own life, the ones you had almost forgotten, come to the edge of the water and drink. Let us pause here for a breath. Let the mind be a pool just for this moment. There is no hurry. When you are ready, we will go on. Imagine a small glass prism resting quietly on a windowsill in an old wooden room. The morning sun comes slanting through the window and touches the prism. And all at once, a soft spread of colors appears on the wall nearby. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, all of them scattered there, gentle and still, from a single ray of clear white light. It is a small miracle, one we almost forget about, because we have seen it so many times in our lives. A rainbow in a puddle after the rain. A sudden band of color arching between the clouds. The prism on the windowsill, quietly dividing sunlight into its many hidden faces. What most of us do not think about when we see such a thing is that the colors were inside the light all along. They were there in the sunrise. They were there at midday. They were there in every ray that has ever touched our skin. The prism does not create them. It only allows them, briefly, to become visible. The Buddhist tradition has used this very image, gently, for many generations, to speak about the awakened heart. When most of us first hear the word awakening, we imagine it must feel one specific way. We picture a deep inner calm, or a great silent joy, or a wide and endless compassion. And because we expect it to feel one particular way, we often miss all the other ways it is already arriving in us. The Zen and Buddhist masters smile softly at this. They have long known that the awakened heart is not a single flavor. It is, they have said, more like a quiet garden of small flowers. Each one is beautiful in its own season. Each one is a little different from the others, and all of them are growing from the same gentle soil. Sometimes the awakened heart arrives as silence, soft and wide, with nothing particular to say. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet gratitude, rising for no reason at all, just while drinking a cup of tea. Sometimes it comes as a great tenderness for the world, for strangers in the street, for the small animals at the edge of the garden, for your own self in a mirror. Sometimes it comes as clear seeing, as though something you had been puzzled about has simply, at last, become plain. Sometimes it is a small laugh, rising from the middle of the chest at the sweetness of being alive. All of these are the rainbow. All of these are the same light, passing through the prism of a particular hour, a particular breath, a particular heart. And no one of them is more the awakened mind than another. Let us explore a story about a young seeker who arrived at a quiet Buddhist monastery long ago, full of earnest questions about the awakened heart. He was a bright young man, eager to understand. He had been reading and thinking and traveling for many months, searching for the right teachers. When he reached this monastery, which sat high on a green hillside beside an ancient grove of plum trees, he hoped that here, at last, he would receive a single, clear answer to the question that had been following him for years. What does an awakened heart feel like? He wanted to know. Just that. One true answer. So that I might know when I have found it. On his first morning, he approached a monk who was sweeping the courtyard. The monk had a calm, quiet face, and the young seeker was drawn to the soft stillness around him. "Venerable one," he said, bowing, "may I ask you a question?" "Of course," the monk said, leaning on his broom. "What does the awakened heart feel like? When you have truly touched it, what is it like?" The monk paused for a long moment. He watched a small sparrow land on the courtyard stones and then hop away. "Silence," he said at last. "For me, it is silence. A soft, wide silence that has no edges to it, as though the whole world has quietly exhaled at once." The young seeker thanked him and carried the answer in his heart. Silence. Good. Perhaps this was the feeling he had been searching for all along. But later that same morning, he met a different monk, older, walking slowly in the garden among the flowers. The young seeker approached him with the same bow and the same question. "What does the awakened heart feel like?" The older monk laughed softly. He had kind eyes with many fine lines around them. "Oh, for me, my young friend," he said, "it feels like gratitude. Gratitude rising for no reason at all. I will be standing in the kitchen, chopping a small vegetable, and all at once I am so grateful to be alive. Grateful for the knife in my hand. Grateful for the soft wood of the cutting board. Grateful for the sunlight coming through the window. I cry a little sometimes. Silly old monk. The young seeker smiled, just a little confused. Silence. Gratitude. Which one was the true feeling? That afternoon, he met a third monk, a woman with a shaved head and quiet, watchful eyes. She was sitting on a stone bench beneath one of the plum trees, looking at nothing in particular. He bowed. "May I ask you the same question I have been asking? Please, what does the awakened heart feel like?" She looked at him for a moment and smiled. "It feels like seeing, young one. Clear seeing. One moment I am confused, the next the confusion has simply dissolved, and I am looking at what is in front of me without any fog between me and it. That is what it is for me. A clear seeing, a small, sweet coming home to what is true." Now the young seeker was truly puzzled. 3 monks. 3 different answers. Silence. Gratitude. Clear seeing. How could the awakened heart be all of these things at once? He walked back toward his small room at the edge of the monastery, turning the question over and over in his mind. Was one of the monks more advanced than the others? Was one of them closer to the truth? Or was the truth itself made of several pieces, and he would have to assemble them like a patient craftsman, laying each one beside the others? He could not find the answer, no matter how carefully he thought. His head began to ache, gently, with all the wondering. That evening, tired and a little discouraged, he climbed a small path to the very top of the hill, where, he had been told, the oldest monk of the monastery lived alone in a small wooden room. The old monk was said to be very wise and to speak very rarely and to be deeply loved by everyone who met him. The path was steep, winding through pine trees whose needles softened every footstep. The setting sun was warm on the young seeker's back. Somewhere below, a small temple bell rang gently for the evening. His heart, which had been rushing all day with questions, began to slow as he climbed. By the time he reached the small wooden hut at the top of the hill, his breath was quiet, his shoulders were soft, and the questions had grown smaller, no longer shouting, only asking. The young seeker knocked gently on the wooden door. The old monk opened it slowly. He was very small, very thin, with a soft, warm smile and bright dark eyes. Come in," he said. The young seeker stepped inside. The room was simple. A small cushion on the floor, a wooden bowl on a low shelf, a single window facing west. And there, on the windowsill, a small glass prism catching the last rays of the evening sun. The old monk invited him to sit. The young seeker bowed and sat and gathered himself. "Venerable one," he said, "I have come to you because I am confused. I have asked 3 different monks today what the awakened heart feels like, and each of them has given me a different answer. One said silence, one said gratitude, one said clear seeing. I wish to understand which one of them is right." The old monk smiled gently. He did not answer right away. Instead, he turned slowly toward the windowsill and reached out with 2 small fingers. He picked up the glass prism and held it carefully in his open palm. "Come here," he said. "Come sit beside me." The young seeker moved close. The evening sun was low in the sky, warm and gold, and was touching the old monk's hand where the prism rested. "Look," the old monk said, turning the prism slightly. "Watch what happens." And the young seeker watched as a soft rainbow of colors appeared on the wooden floor beside them. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, all of them gentle and still, from a single ray of pale gold light. "Tell me," the old monk said softly, "which color is the sunlight?" The young seeker looked at the rainbow, and a small understanding began to rise in his chest. "All of them, Venerable One. They are all the sunlight." The old monk smiled and rested a hand lightly on the young seeker's back. "Just so. Your 3 brothers and sisters here at this monastery have each told you the truth. One of them sees the silence of the light. One of them sees the gratitude of the light. One of them sees the clear seeing of the light. But all of them are looking at the same light, the same single light passing through each of them, showing itself in whichever color that particular heart is best able to see." The young seeker sat quietly for a long time as the rainbow on the floor gently faded with the setting sun. "And so," the old monk said, very softly, "do not ask, young one, which color is the awakened heart. Only ask that the light, in whichever color it chooses, come to visit you gently, again and again, in your own time, in your own way." The Buddha himself offered this teaching, in his own words, many times. He compared the awakened mind to a clear sky. He compared it to a still pool. He compared it to an open lotus and to a lamp that does not flicker. Different images, all of them pointing to the same light. And it means something very freeing for each of us. It means that the quiet moments we already have, the small tender feelings, the brief soft openings, are not less than the grand awakening we may have imagined. They are the awakening, showing itself in the color our heart can most easily see in this particular hour of our life. Some of us are most at home in silence. Some of us find our doorway through kindness. Some of us come alive in gratitude. Some of us open most easily through a great and gentle wonder at the ordinariness of things. All of these are the light. All of these are the same simple truth the Buddha pointed to under his tree so many ages ago. And none of them is wrong. None of them is second best. None of them is a lesser shade. And so, as this evening's teachings move gently toward their close, perhaps there is no need to decide which color of the rainbow is yours. Perhaps it is enough to sense that the light is already passing through you, has always been passing through you, is even now, quietly, in this small hour, scattering its soft colors across the wooden floor of your life. The Buddhist tradition sometimes speaks of each of us as a small and warm temple, where something very old and very kind sits quietly, awake. The temple was not built by us. The kindness was not placed there by us. They have been there all along, waiting for us to come and sit beside them. Tonight, perhaps, you are sitting beside them a little more closely than you were an hour ago. That is enough. That is always enough. Let us pause here, softly. Rest in whichever color has been visiting you tonight. When you are ready, we will close together. And so, softly, we come to the end of our quiet hour together. Somewhere within you now, perhaps, there are small pictures left behind from the evening. A wandering monk beneath a tree at the edge of a mountain village. Two young Buddhist sisters laughing in a small hall full of children. A shadow dancing across a white cloth screen. A plum tree blossoming by an old gate. A grandmother and her grandchild kneeling by a row of lettuce seedlings. A young musician remembering how to tune his lute. A still pool in an ancient forest where a gentle doe steps out from the trees to drink. A small prism on a windowsill, scattering light across a wooden floor. These are only stories. They are not the truth. But each of them, in its quiet way, points gently towards something that is true. The silence that has always been here. The soft kindness beneath your own life. The warm, awakened heart you have been carrying, without knowing, since you were a child. Nothing you have heard this evening needs to be remembered. What is true will return to you on its own, in its own time. A passing image, a familiar line, a warmth you cannot quite name. That is how these old Buddhist teachings have worked for thousands of years. Gently, slowly, without any effort at all. May your mind be at ease tonight. May your body be soft. May your heart be held. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Sleepy Monk.